Have you ever wondered what it is about reaching for our dreams that feels so hard and requires so much of our own healing? Are you curious about how moving towards your own creativity might heal what's making you feel stuck? Well, that is why we made this show. I'll be having conversations with emotional health experts as well as artists, musicians, and creatives, all with the intention of resourcing and inspiring you to uncover your true creative self. I'm Courtney Lancaster, and this is the Heal Create Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Heal Create Podcast. I am really excited about what we're talking about today. The topic is brain retraining, possibly, maybe something you've never heard about, and I'm really excited to be explaining it and sharing it today because it was a huge part of my story and my recovery, and it's also something that I use with clients. And I brought one of my favorite people, an expert in the field of brain retraining, to talk with us about it today, and her name is Katie Nickerson. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much. So glad to chat with you today about this.
I'm so excited to chat with you. Actually, when we had a list of people that we wanted to invite onto the podcast, you were like on the top 5. Because your knowledge of it, also because of my relationship with you as somebody who I've talked to extensively about the topic of brain retraining. And I really want to go into what that is, because my goal for this podcast, I know I told you before we started, but my goal for this podcast is that people would walk away with this idea of what brain retraining is and how to implement it immediately.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, definitely. My name is Katie Nickerson, and I live in Alabama. Born and raised here, did a little stint in California, but back in Alabama now. And I have a neuroplasticity coaching business. So I am a neuroplasticity or brain retraining coach. And I help people that are dealing with some chronic illnesses. I help them use brain retraining and neuroplasticity-based tools in order to heal parts of their brains that then allow the rest of their body to heal, to experience health and freedom.
Yes, she does. And she's so good at it. And I never heard you explain it like that before, a neuroplasticity coach, but that's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. And people actually might be more familiar with the term neuroplasticity than the term brain retraining.
Yeah.
And they really are the same. It's brain retraining is what we use to take advantage of our neuroplastic brain to heal and change and grow.
Yes.
So can you explain what exactly is the practice of brain retraining?
Yes. I think that it might be helpful just to define neuroplasticity. I don't know if you've done that on your podcast.
No, that's
but most people that I say I like work as a neuroplasticity coach, they're like, I have no idea what that word means.
Oh, okay.
But not very, I mean, some probably do, but the majority of people that are not in this kind of world don't know. So it is not very complicated. It's just neuro, like your brain, plasticity, which is like the ability for it. If something is, plastic, we can heat it up and mold it and change it. So it just means that we can change our brain. We can change specifically those neural pathways in our brain and the structures of our brain as well. Yeah. So that's neuroplasticity. And then your other question is like, what is brain retraining exactly? Was that the question?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and brain retraining is just using a different set of tools. It's just a modality that we use in order to create those changes in the brain. Mm-hmm. So it's just a set of modalities that we use, mostly cognitive, like we call them top down, but like cognitive based tools and modalities to cause changes in the brain. If it's like, it is, I mean, if we think of brain retraining or brain, some people just call it brain training, but it's teaching the brain and changing and showing it and helping it react differently and to unlearn some conditioned practices and habits in the brain.
And what are those tools? What's like maybe the main tool that you teach? I mean, I have my idea of what it is. I'm wondering how, as an actual coach, you would, like, it feels like a really broad topic that we could really get into the deep science of, but also at the end of the day, can correct me if I'm wrong, it's intentionally setting aside time every day or whenever, every day, to consciously and intentionally think of positive memories or experiences in detail so that your body can really remember what those felt like or what they could feel like, which over time creates new positive neural pathways in the brain.
Yes.
Am I missing anything?
I would add, I think that's absolutely correct. And I would add, we're using the purpose of like why we're doing that. And a lot of times it is to couple it with something that the brain finds maybe dangerous or triggering. Like we start with the trigger first.
Yeah.
And we kind of end with that, the memories and the visualizations, because of that neurons that fire together, wire together. So we're trying to create that positive association between those two things using those visualizations.
Right.
And those memories, which there's also doing other things like desensitizing the amygdala and changing the receptor sites in those neuronal cells in your brain to be able to utilize help like the neurochemistry of that rest and digest thing. But it is, I would say it's that visualization, but starting to with observation of observing, what do I want to change here? Mm-hmm. What is it that is kind of that trigger? What do I want to change? And then observing our thoughts, our maybe even emotions, and then kind of labeling that and just like, okay, that's maybe a pathway that I don't need or want. And then redirecting, replacing that with a different thought process or different belief. It's kind of changing those beliefs and then like really cementing them or installing them by using the visualization tool. Or going into those positive memories.
So, okay, in case you're confused or lost on like kind of what we're talking about, I want to share a little bit, and I would love to have you share a little bit as well, about how I found brain retraining and how it was so incredibly pivotal for me. I mean, I can really look back. If my life was a road, I can look back and see that it was like such a hard turn in the right direction for me when I began brain retraining. And this is why. I have always been interested, always my whole life, even before I was, going through my own dark period, always interested in emotional health. And I was always trying to figure out, because as a kid, we never talked about any of that. So that obviously created this like curiosity and fascination and like, wait, what really is going on under the surface? And like, how do you express emotions in a healthy way? And how do I make friends with those painful memories and parts of me and not be scared of emotion? Because I just remembered, and I wasn't in a culture that talked about emotion, and a lot of people were secretly struggling. And so I've always been interested in emotional health. And then when I went through my own trauma recovery journey and I, was diagnosed with all the things, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and I was just in such a hole, it became my goal to figure out what was going on, which is, I think, an important part of, the healing process. But it was the only thing I knew how to do. And it seemed like the more I tried to zero in on my pain and figure out how to fix myself and feel my emotions, the deeper I was getting sunk into them. So it is very important for anyone recovering from trauma to learn how to feel your pain in a productive way, in a healthy way, with support, in a way that actually helps you feel your emotion and then release it. But I wasn't doing that. I was just feeling my emotion, really like feeling so heavy with my pain. And what I didn't realize was that I wasn't adding anything safe or good or positive into my brain and body. I was only feeling the heaviness that was inside of me, which I can now look back and say, oh, my nervous system, I was so dysregulated. I was trying to like, because I had heard you have to feel it to heal it. So I would be like trying to, bless her heart, feel my fear as much as possible, thinking that that would somehow mean it would like be over at some point and then I wouldn't have to feel it again, or feel my sadness in such a like deep, 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 dark way that I could just get over it, and not realizing that in hindsight, what I was actually experiencing was a lot of unsafety in my body and a lot of fear. And the more that you feel your fear and you believe the stories that are coming out of your fear, because your state creates your story, the more that your body thinks there's more to be afraid of.
Yeah, that's where that reticular activating system comes in and really affects
Yes.
that as well, right? The more we like focus on that and believe those things, that's that part of the brain that like filters out or distorts or like gets to decide like what it brings to our awareness. And so it's going to like even bring to your awareness and cause you to focus on those things even more.
Yes, totally. Yeah. That's a great time to mention the reticular activating system. I don't know if we talked about that on this podcast yet, but the RAS, the reticular activating system, is the part of your brain that's always looking for patterns. So it's the part of your brain that like when you buy a car and then you see that same exact car everywhere, or you hear a new word, you learn a word and then you feel like everybody you hear is saying that exact word. It's that part of your brain that's like always looking for patterns. So I had really trained my brain to look for patterns of pain, fear, unsafety without knowing it, thinking I was like really doing the work, quote unquote. But there was no, I wasn't training my brain to look for goodness, to look for safety, which meant that I couldn't trust goodness or safety or love or connection, because it seemed to be always followed by something dark and sad and painful and scary that it reminded me of in my past, or that I was, dealing with in therapy or whatever. So I was just really, my brain was primed to look for pain.
Yes.
And what I noticed happening was that I was getting physically really sick. I was getting a lot of symptoms of sensitivity to food, sensitivity to chemicals, light and sound, with inflammation, and however my genetic makeup had been set up, I was getting my own kind of cluster of symptoms that would just flare up every now and then. And so that is when I found brain retraining, and that kind of explained to me the idea of like, oh, no, you actually have to train your body to look for goodness and safety and feel and experience goodness and safety. And then that's how your body heals, because you're actually helping your nervous system to calm down enough to know there's no danger. It's safe to operate in a healthy way. All is well. All will be okay. So that's my story that at least leads me up to the point of finding brain retraining. And I'm curious about you, if you could share, any parts of your journey that led you up to the point of brain retraining as well.
Yeah, definitely. What led me to brain retraining is I started experiencing some chronic symptoms, just like mysterious chronic illness symptoms, and started accumulating a lot, all these diagnoses of different incurable chronic illnesses. And
oh, really? Like a bunch of them. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. And I knew, I was like, they've got to all be related. But of course, no doctor it was like I was going to a specialist for my eyes, and a specialist for muscular pain, and specialist for this, and specialist for all these different things. And so they were only looking at their specific specialty, but nobody was like looking at overall. What is common throughout all this is it's an inflammation of all of these different, there's inflammation in all these different parts of my body, amongst lots of other symptoms and such. But I was like, there's got to be this all has to be connected somehow. But
Mm-hmm.
making a really long story short, I ventured into the world of like functional medicine and holistic health and did all of the treatments and the supplements and the diets.
Did you switch all your products to clean products?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Cleared your whole house and all of your pantry and all of your medicine cabinet of all that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was, Yep. That was at the beginning. That was like, yeah. And then got really intense about what I was putting in my body, diet wise as well, and supplement wise. And then was diagnosed with mold toxicity. So then like got rid of all of my belongings, moved out of my house, literally got rid of most of everything that I owned, and moved across the country. And I mean, took really drastic measures to try and heal from a lot of these different conditions of extreme chronic fatigue and chemical sensitivities and mold sensitivities and histamine and mast cell. And I mean, so many different things. But it didn't, nothing, like I just continued to get worse. And it was in that point where I was pretty desperate, had done all of the things, like my personality, my tendencies, my protective tendencies at that point were very like perfectionistic and type A. So I did all of the like protocols to a T, but it just didn't help or it didn't resolve my symptoms. I'm sure it did, something good for my body.
Yeah.
But it didn't resolve the symptoms. And that's when I was introduced to brain retraining. I'd heard about it, but it sounded a little bit wacky to me.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. I was like, there's something wrong with my body. Like, I don't need to meditate. There's something very, very wrong with my body. It needs to be fixed from like a medical perspective, not like let me just sit and meditate type of thing, which obviously is not what it is. But and then I would say divinely started talking to a stranger who at a doctor's office, but at that point being severely fatigued, that was not my normal to just strike up conversations with strangers. But she ended up having some of the same conditions, rare conditions that I had, and she told me about brain retraining.
Oh, wow.
And she even was like, it was kind of weird. I don't know. I didn't really like it. I didn't jive with it. She didn't want to do anything that felt any like similar to meditation at all. But I was like, well, I have nothing to lose. I'll give it a try. So I did. And it actually was like the missing piece for me that enabled me to heal from all of these like invisible chronic illnesses and kind of reverse all of those diagnoses and within a few months pretty much all of my chronic symptoms had resolved and were gone. So it was a very life-changing for me, and so that's why I'm like in this field now and helping other people do that, since it was so pivotal, obviously life-changing and pivotal for me.
Yeah. I thank you so much for sharing that. And my doctor actually recommended it to me last year. 2 years ago. I had like the most intense reaction to an antibiotic that they put me on. And I already had a lot of, like a lot of diagnoses, a lot of different things that were wrong and going wrong and getting worse, like no matter what I did or cut out or what I ate. And it was just like, because basically what I was saying, every time I cut something out or I like gave something up, as I was telling my body like, yeah, you're right, there is something dangerous from you. I'm going to remove this danger. I'm going to remove this danger. And I was like basically teaching my body that the whole world is out to get you and the whole world is dangerous. On top of that, I was doing trauma therapy, which, everything unfolded exactly how it should have. I had built a lot of capacity, but, even when you go into deep memories and you're trying to heal memories, you're trying to go back, if your body sees your past and your memories as a massive threat to your safety, which it does for so many people that have trauma, and you don't have the resources to bring safety to those memories because your whole body and brain are trained for looking for danger, then it's going to make even trauma healing more dysregulating,
Yes.
more dangerous to your nervous system. It's going to like, you're laughing because you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, yes, I'm laughing because I was thinking about, I tried like this, like in that before brain retraining, did this like trauma therapy session, and I went home and could not move or get out of bed for three days afterwards.
Wow. Yeah.
And I remember like contacting the therapist. I actually think it was the next time I went in for another session. I was like, I'm here. If this is what I need to do, I will do it. I was ready to, it's that push through, just get it done, just do it. And I go back and I'm telling her how. I'm like, yeah, well, I like couldn't move for 3 days and was in bed. And she was like, what? That's not normal.
Yeah.
And like that is, and so we like backed it up a lot, but and ended up just like stopping that because it even just like a teensy bit of it, like really, my nervous system was so dysregulated and had no sense of safety at all. And so it can be counterproductive in that state. Like obviously I'm all for dealing with trauma in a safe and healthy way. It's a piece of it, but we have to have a sense of safety. A sense of safety, a way to connect to safety. Your brain even has to feel safe, like going to that, experiencing, a ventral vagal state, experiencing that rest and digest state. Because for a lot of nervous systems, that feels even unsafe to the brain to come out of that like survival, fight or flight, protective state.
That's so wild. That the same thing happened to me several times. And I think I had gotten to a point where when I found brain retraining, I wasn't at the darkest point in my life. I think I had just so gotten used to that level of dysregulation. And I was like, and a lot of people you'll hear say that, like, I'm just going to have to manage my anxiety for the rest of my life. Yeah. Or like, this is just a mental illness and I'm going to have to just kind of hold this tension and I thought that was me. I thought this is because of what happened to me. It's also probably because of my brain chemistry, whatever. I'm just going to have to learn how to hold this. And then when I began to brain retrain, I began to daily practice good, wonderful, like memories that my body recognized as healthy and safe. At this point in my life, I'm like, oh my gosh, I know what it's like to feel like I'm here in my body, in the world, with like a big, big, long future in front of me. And that's not something that I felt then. I felt like I was pretty like, okay, like I now know what the trauma is. I've gone through a lot of recovery, but like, I'm just going to have to sort of hold this anxiety. And it is so possible to heal from anxiety.
Yes. Yes, I experienced anxiety pretty much my entire life until brain retraining. And afterwards I was like, I didn't realize it was possible to live like this, to go through the day without anxiety. And it was such my just like normal mode of MO for my entire life that you don't even like realize it, I think. Yeah. It's not like I was never having like panic attacks per se, but just having that just like anxiety always there.
That low hum.
Was like, wow, I didn't know this was an option to feel like this, to not feel anxious all of the time.
Totally, because anxiety has so much to do, if not everything to do, with a body that's just constantly on guard for danger.
Yes.
So, and it might just be like a low constant on guard, just like a background noise of like nervousness, sort of agitation, irritation that you don't even know is not optimal. You don't even know doesn't have to be your norm.
Yeah, it's not always like you're consciously worrying about something that's not anxiety. Obviously is that, but it's not just that.
Yes.
Like you described, it's that like just feeling of tension, even if like your body is like tense sometimes, or you just feel in a rush.
Yes.
Most of the time, like I just can't get everything done. It just rush and thinking ahead through every little detail, like that's anxiety as well.
Yes. Yes, totally. Yeah, that's anxiety, hypervigilance, perfectionism, so many iterations of
Yes.
anxiety, which is
Yes.
really, yeah, which, like we said, is a body that's on guard. And it is possible to train your body to feel safe to where that guard system doesn't have to be on.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like, to me, to really simplify it, it's like anxiety is your nervous system in that sympathetic, in a
Yep.
sympathetic dominant state. Um,
Yes.
for the most part, there's for the most
Yeah.
part, but you can, and that's what a lot of brain retraining is doing, is shifting your like home base. And if your nervous system, if you're anxious all the time, your kind of home base in your nervous system is that like fight or flight sympathetic state.
Right.
And there's
Right.
such a range of that. It doesn't mean you're like walking around panicking all the time or worrying all the time,
Right.
but brain retraining is helping your nervous system find a new, like, to feel safe in operating in that. The rest and digest is, I think, probably the most common term for it. That
Yep.
ventral vagal, that
Yep.
like rest and heal,
Yeah.
thriving mode.
Yes.
And it
Yeah.
can take some like consistent practice of, different tools can be those visualizations to help your brain see that it doesn't have to be on alert all the time.
Yeah.
And that's happening subconsciously at all times. Like the brain is designed to be assessing for threats 24/7, and it will always do that. And that's a good thing.
That's a healthy, good
Yeah,
thing.
it's a healthy thing. But it's like sometimes the brain can come to the incorrect conclusions of this is a danger when there isn't, when it's not actually a danger. So it's kind of like dialing that down so that you can stay in that relax, that rest and digest, or ventral vagal, parasympathetic state. Right.
Yeah, so well said. It's shifting your home base. Or I think Deb Dana used to say, or says, who's a really gifted teacher on the nervous system, that we all have a home away from home. Our home that we should feel comfortable in is our ventral state, where we are a state of our true self state, inspired, calm, curious, creative, compassionate, caring. That should be our baseline. That should be like where we return to if we get dysregulated. Dysregulated just means you're going into a threat mode. So when you're so used to being in a threat mode, like in your sympathetic state or your dorsal state of shutdown, then you are in a home away from home. So brain retraining is a practice that helps us return back to our home state and our ventral state. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. I like the way that you put that, because everybody has access to all of those states. Like everyone has.
Yeah, everyone.
Every single person has access to feeling that calm, curious, connected, compassionate. Like every person, your brain came designed with that, and that is your normal. Like that is your truest sense of state. And then we have, everybody also has those protective states, that sympathetic fight or flight state. And we haven't talked about dorsal, but that's that more depressed shutdown state. And they're good. Like we need them. They're what keep us alive, and we always are moving through them. But sometimes the nervous system can get like stuck in one of them. Or another thing that brain retraining does is it like makes that nervous system more flexible so that it's easier. Like your nervous system is supposed to, it senses a threat, it might go into that anxious sympathetic state, but it's supposed to be able to like easily move back to that home base of that rest and digest. And, practicing those visualizations and other brain retraining tools makes it like increases that flexibility to where it makes it easier for your brain to go back to that state, because I'm sure some people have experienced that where you're like, I can't just turn it off or calm down. Like it feels really hard to shift out of that.
Yes. Okay. So I remember learning in my trauma therapy journey that dreaming is imperative for healing. So you can't heal if you can't dream, because you're not thinking beyond where you're at right now. You're circling around where you have been.
Mm-hmm.
And so that idea was so mind-blowing to me that like your healing needs your dreams in order to unfold. And then now on this side, as a coach especially, working with different people, I see that like your dreams will always require your healing. So when you have these big dreams and you're so excited about moving forward, like the beautiful thing about, I think, the God's plan for us or whatever is that he puts these dreams in our hearts for the purpose of our wholeness, our experiencing our whole true selves. So the relationship between healing and obviously creating, this is the Heal Create podcast, is something I've always been really interested in. What I didn't know was how to make it a daily practice. So I knew how to have those big moments where I was like, I want to do this and I'm so excited about this and I want to have this healthy family and I want to make a big impact or whatever. And then I would like go back to my home, away from home, go back to like the other 6 days of the week when I would be like super like anxious and like worried and, you know, just kind of sick and tending to my sickness and all this stuff. So brain retraining introduced me to the idea of making that concept a daily practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm wondering, as a coach, can you explain very like basic level, if you're teaching somebody about the practice of brain retraining from scratch, how would you explain like the different steps of what it actually looks like?
Of what brain retraining looks like?
Like the daily like brain retraining practice.
I would say let's take the next 10 hours to explain that.
That's so funny because it's probably because you're immersed in that world. To me, I feel like, oh, it's easy. You just do this and this. But I know that you actually walk people through understanding it as a lifestyle every day. And so it feels like
this is what I find. This is what I find with most clients. And maybe this is because I am working mostly with people that have severe chronic illnesses and have a limited amount of energy. And because of how the brain works and where resistance comes to, I find that people don't tend to make something a daily practice and do it consistently if they don't understand why they're doing it or what it's doing. Like because there is a part of your brain that's like, its whole purpose is to see how much energy you're putting towards something. Yeah. And then it's also monitoring how much return you're getting from that. And if it's not liking the return that it's getting on the energy that you're putting towards something, is going to create resistance. So you stop doing that. But the thing with brain retraining is you don't always notice shifts at the beginning. It's kind of a long game thing. And so there needs to be understanding around why we're doing something and what we're doing it for, especially again, since I'm working with people with chronic illnesses, like understanding how we're kind of shifting a completely different mindset of this is happening in my body because of something in my brain. There's something wrong with my body. This is my brain. So I guess that's probably the context to that. Like, let's take the next 10 hours to explain that. But simply put, again, this is very challenging for me. I think you probably honestly could probably answer that better than me. But I guess I'm wondering in what context do you mean that? For who are you wanting that answer for? Because I think depending on who you're speaking to and what they're using it for, that's going to be, the answer's going to be different.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I've done 2 brain retraining courses, and there are so many out there. There really are. So in case you're wondering, like, wait, what even are they talking about? Where do I even look into this? You can literally Google brain retraining and you'll see so many different ones. The one that I started with was the one that you recommended, which was called DNRS. And it's Annie Hopper. It's a program that goes through the different, like, a lot of education around what brain retraining is, and then like the practice of like implementing it into your day. And then there's another one called the Gupta program, which it's all the same practice. No matter what course you go to or whatever, however you study it, I would say it's all the same. At the heart of it, it's the same practice of like sitting down and actively detailing a memory of goodness that you've either had or an imaginary memory you'd like to create.
Okay.
And like really going through that. So yeah, so I was just wondering if how you explain that practice, not maybe like so much the why and the how, because I think you're right. Depending on where you're at, if you're severely dysregulated and you're like, I mean, I know you've told me about clients that like are in bed all the time, completely bedridden, and clients that are really, really sick and have so many painful like diagnoses in their body, which is another thing to know. I work in the emotional health realm. You're working with people that have a lot of physical things as well, and the answer is the same: is that daily practice of rehearsing goodness. So that practice part is really the question that I would ask, like, what are the details there
of a visualization practice?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That specifically, I think the way that I like to teach it or recommend it is identifying first, like, what state do you want to experience? What state are you trying to focus on or practice? Is it a state of calm? Is it a state of peace? Is it a state of joy? Is it confidence? And then thinking about what is a scenario either in the past that I've already experienced, that would be a memory, or a scenario in which I can imagine, like kind of making up a visualization that would help me to feel and experience that state.
Yeah.
Right. And that can be tied to like specific like things we want to experience in our lives. We're not trying to create specific experiences, but really we're just trying to help our brain practice and memorize and experience these different states, which are creating senses of safety. But imagining a scenario and putting yourself in that and using your senses, starting there and using your senses as kind of like a guide, a way to guide you through that visualization. So in this thing that you're imagining, what are you seeing? And even just describing that in your head, I'm seeing, if it was, I'm, at the beach, what are you seeing? I'm seeing the waves crashing. I'm seeing seagulls flying. I'm seeing all these other people. I see these, all through that. And then choosing another sense. What am I hearing? What am I feeling? Can you imagine what it would feel like to have your toes in the sand? What is the temperature? What does that feel like? What are you smelling? And what are you tasting? Can you taste kind of that saltiness in the air? And as you're doing that, that is really affecting the limbic system in your brain and telling it that it's detecting all of those things as safety.
Real. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would go into like, what do I appreciate about this moment? How do I feel in my body? How do I feel emotionally? What are those thoughts that I'm thinking in my head? So I would help people kind of get into that rhythm or that practice of some different prompts and things that you're imagining as you're kind of visualizing and really trying and connecting to that emotion that it's evoking, that state. And even if you don't feel it, even if it's like, it actually is beneficial, even if you don't feel totally relaxed or like grateful or excited, like even just saying those words, like there's a lot that goes into it. There's that language and the neurolinguistic piece of it. There's the sensory neuroceptive piece of it. There's a lot of different pieces to it, but connecting with that kind of emotion of it can be really helpful. And, when we're imagining things, our brain, I know you know this, but your brain doesn't know the difference between what you're imagining and what's like actually happening. So as you're imagining it, you can actually experience changes in your body, like physiological changes in your body to maybe your heart rate or your temperature or so many different things. And then it gets installed in your hippocampus, the memory center, as a past memory, which, you know, is a whole nother topic that affects a lot of things. And so it kind of also ties back to like when we're trying to feel our emotions, which is sometimes I would describe more as thinking them than feeling them. And we're replaying old memories or old narratives, like your brain can perceive that as it's happening. Those negative experiences are happening again, which is doing the same thing. It's also producing neurochemical changes, but ones that are not helpful for us. But this is actually, you know, as you're doing these visualizations, it's actually it's telling, you know, that part of your brain, the hypothalamus, to like produce specific helpful neurochemistry.
Yeah. And such a good point too, that, you know, for so many of us that have anxiety, especially like acute anxiety, you're already imagining things in detail that is affecting your body on such a felt sense level. So you're like, oh my gosh, what if I go into this job interview and then I start sweating and I forget what I'm going to say and then they're looking at me and then I feel so embarrassed and then I don't get the job. Like you're already imagining in detail and then your brain's like, okay, so that's going to happen. How do we protect her from that? We'll give her more fight or flight energy so she can run out of that office, which is the exact opposite of what you need.
Exactly. And it's protective. Like that's the brain trying to like to protect you. Think of all of the worst case scenarios, the things that could go wrong so we can you know, just prepare for them. But it's not going to think about all of the ways it could go right. Yeah. And that's where that's where that visualization piece can go in, is actually visualizing things happening in a helpful way. And what's fascinating is like that's installing like these new neural pathways in your brain so that when you show up to that interview, your brain's like, oh, we already did this. We already had, that's where the hippocampus or the memory center comes in. It's like, oh, we already did this. We know what to do. Yeah. We know what to do. We can stay relaxed. We can stay confident. We don't have to switch into fight or flight and start sweating profusely and then run out. You know, it's like, this is safe. We're telling the brain beforehand that it's safe and that you're like teaching it prior to like how to react in those scenarios. Yeah.
It's funny because I'm performing this Friday night and I have already imagined it in detail so many times that I do feel like I've already done it. I feel like it's like, oh, like it feels like it's already finished in my brain and I'm doing it in a few days. Which is something that what I normally would have done a few years ago, which I would have tried not to think about it as much as possible so that I could just like, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Because my body was like already trying to protect me from it.
Yes, we're trying to like avoid it. That's just teaching the brain that it's a dangerous thing. So when you show up there, it should. It's like, I know what to do. I know what to do to protect Courtney and make this the best. Let's shoot her full with all of these stress neurochemistry that shuts down your creativity and logical thinking centers and all of the things.
Totally. Or you know what? I know what to do to protect you from this danger. I'm going to totally take you out of your body. We're just going to make you so dissociated that you're going to be like a robot going through this. Mm-hmm. And that's why so many people later on think, I've had so many high achieving creatives say, I feel like I'm faking it because I like go and I do these things that I want to do. And then when I get there, I like feel like I'm such a robot and I'm such a fake and I'm, such a liar. And I'm like, that's not what's happening at all. Yeah. That's not what's happening. So anyways, you said when you were talking about the simplified, like actual daily practice, which I appreciate you teaching it that way, because I know it's like you're like, no, I can't just give you that. That's a piece of it. And I totally get it. For those that are interested, book with Katie immediately. Go look into DNRS. There's like so much great information out there. Mm-hmm. I would love to empower anyone listening just to begin to play with the idea of what would it look like to take 10 minutes and write about a really great memory that I've had in detail. Mm-hmm. Even that, which is pretty much what I've been doing every day since a couple of years ago when I found this practice. My life has changed. The experience of my life has changed so dramatically And I thought I was healed when I started. I thought I was like, I know all my trauma. I've done all my work, I think. But even just that daily practice when you were talking about like what, being at the beach, what do I taste? I was imagining myself like at the beach when you were saying that.
Mm-hmm.
And that practice alone, the daily practice of, like I said, writing down in detail or like imagining in detail where you can almost feel it, you can taste it. Your body doesn't know the difference between what's real or imagined, is so helpful for your brain and your nervous system.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. It is because it's producing, like I said, like it's releasing that dopamine and oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins into your bloodstream and desensitizing your amygdala and telling it essentially that you're safe.
Yes.
And then affecting that reticular activating system too, to teach it to look for and to like look for those positive things that are happening. You just become more, naturally
primed.
Yeah. And optimistic and positive in general.
Yep. Yeah. Without like pretending that you are.
Yes.
It's like this isn't gratitude practice. This isn't like you like choosing joy in the moment. This is literally teaching your body to get familiar with a state of safety and calm and expecting the best, or expecting neutrality even is better than expecting the worst. And you're not faking it. You're like actually teaching your body how to do that over time.
Yes. And it can feel like you're, as some piece of it, like choosing, not faking it, but choosing to practice this. And so that it actually does become just automatic. Yeah. I remember after doing brain retraining for a season, I really noticed that shift of where it was just automatic, where I just thought so positively and just felt so naturally grateful. And when things didn't go according to plan, like when things, there was some kind of kink in the plan or things didn't work out as I wanted them to, it was like my natural reaction was like, oh, I guess that wasn't for me. I guess that I'm supposed to go this way. I guess that wasn't my path. I guess this is redirecting me there. And it's not that I didn't ever experience like those more uncomfortable emotions, sure, but there was also this like natural inclination to go to the positive of like, everything's going to work out. Like this is working out for my good somehow.
Yeah. Which, by the way, having the belief that everything is going to work out for me makes trauma recovery 1,000 times easier.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can go into these dark, painful memories and they're not swallowing you up. You're like, gosh, I want to bring compassion and curiosity and be with that younger part of me. And then, but you have this belief, like even this painful memory, and I've had some really intense, bad memories that I had to work through. But when you know that you'll be okay and you think that things will work out for you, it doesn't swallow you up. You go, you dip into it, and then you come up and out of it.
When you try to do the trauma work without connection to that truth, that kind of core self, your true self, your adult self, it's very overwhelming and scary. But like when you have that part of you that, like you said, that knows that you're okay, that you're going to be okay, that you're going to be there for yourself no matter what, it's much more productive and helpful. And on that trauma note, I do want to mention that, I have a lot of people that come to me and say, I don't know if this will work for me because I don't have any happy memories. Like they're all
I'm so glad you're saying
layered with trauma. And sure, like maybe they do have some, but it still is in the context of maybe a family that felt very, very unsafe, or a home that felt really unsafe. Because a lot of people, again, that I work with like severe chronic illness have a history of traumas,
complex trauma.
Complex trauma. And it still absolutely works, even if you don't use past memories are a wonderful, wonderful tool. But if you feel like I don't have any, that is okay. Like you don't have to have them in order to rewire your brain.
Yeah.
You can
make them up.
You can make them up. You can make them up, and it has the same like effect. Or you can use more of a future oriented visualization of something that you want to experience in the future.
Yeah.
So again, the past memories is a wonderful tool, but if that's not like, if you're feeling like, oh, I don't have that, I can't, this won't work for me. Yeah. That's not true either. You can don't have to have that.
Yeah. In my, spiritual upbringing, there was a verse that said, whatever's true, whatever's lovely, whatever's excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things, or be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I think the reason why I bring that up is because that was 35 years of my, deep, deep, deep in that. And I thought that meant, like we had talked about, the difference between like faking joy and like actually experiencing it. Like, nope, nothing negative, not gonna think anything negative. Nope, just gonna like choose joy. And that's not what this is.
No.
This is the actual choice to like consciously, like we've already talked about, really rehearse those memories that you either have or you create and you make up. And do you find, because I find with myself and clients that the more that you practice, the more good memories you actually do remember.
That's what I was like wanting to say next. Is I have, certainly have had that experience myself, but like I experience that a lot with clients that will say like, feel like they don't really have any positive memories or just have like a couple. And then after practicing for a while, it's like one client recently described it as like this like whole vault opened up and I like remembered all of these positive memories that I had like totally forgotten, and then there they were.
The science is there that recovery is so possible, and this is a really beautifully scientifically backed practice. So Katie, I already want to have you back again next season for this because I have 10 more questions that I would love for you to
just talk about
everyone. I know
this with you for hours and hours.
I know, but thank you so much for sharing your story and for just encouraging everyone with what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing about brain retraining because I do think it could help so many people. So thank you for sharing this with your part of the world.
Yes, absolutely. Where can people find you if they want to work with you or follow along with your whatever you have to say?
Yeah, if they want to connect with me, I would say Instagram's probably the best place for that. And you can find me there at Katie Nickerson Health. And it has information about my story and more about brain retraining and how that relates to chronic illness and how to work with me as well.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, again, thank you so much for coming. And thank you everyone for listening. And we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.